Welcome to EPG Pathshala. I am Dr. Mrinmoy Pramanik. I teach comparative Indian language and literature at the University of Calcutta. Today we will discuss a module from comparative literature, drama in India, and the module is on Rabindranath Tagore's play, theory and the plays, Post Office, Muktadhara, Rakta, Karabi and Chitra. Tagore, 1861 to 1941. Tagore is a celebrated and significant figure in the roles of poet, novelist, short story writer, playwright, songwriter, composer, educator and social thinker from India. A larger-than-life portrayal and an iconic space to him has always remained highlighted in his native place Bengal and in India. His legendary presence in his contemporary 20th century and voluminous presence in posthumous celebration has been a matter of concern in the social, political and obviously in cultural arena of India and probably in the world, placing India in the contour of world literature through his poems, songs as well of Gitanjali, which was awarded Nobel Prize in Literature during 1913. Tagore became indispensable in terms of defining the aesthetic and the nuances of Indian writing. In the following sections, 4 plays of Tagore are discussed with their relevance in the dramatic works of Tagore. A poet-dramatist placed in the time of these plays when in Europe, Maeterlinck, Strindberg, Yeats and Eliot are prioritizing the symbolist era. In Bengal, the colonial educated middle class engaging themselves in the plays of farce and of imitating the European stage types with plays of marvelous actions and scene drops. These 4 plays of Tagore, however, disconnects from both the region and places itself with the identity of Indian plays. Now let us go into the discussion of the plays. The first one we take for discussion is the Post Office, or the Bangla title of the play is Dagghor. The Post Office, 1912, a translation of the original play Dagghor in Bengali, was written during what is known as the Gitanjali period, a period when the poet Tagore wrote Gitanjali. The educator Tagore imagined Shantiniketan and Vishwabharati, and the dramatist Tagore revealed some of both the aspects in the Post Office. Operationally, the Post Office divided into 2 acts, the first being a little lengthier than the second. However, Act 1 is much simpler than Act 2. In Act 1, the dialogue goes on with not more than 2 characters on the stage at any given point of time. The boys, since they are individualized, are essentially 1 character. In Act 2, there is more of tension and there are more characters than 2. The pace of Act 1 is slow, whereas the Act 2 is comparatively fast. So that from the point of view of the destiny of impression, both the acts are evenly balanced. The plot revolves around the protagonist, boy Amol, a sick child. In Act 1, the sick child sitting near the window cogitates and talks to the strangers that pass along, and in Act 2 the child is in bed and people talk to him or watch him sleep. In the first act, therefore, the boy looks out, rather peeps in through his window into the world. In the second, the world streams into the child's consciousness. The story engages 2 planes. Mundane life goes on, and the Amol and Gaffer Fakir adds the plane of imagination to it, and then the revelation comes. The plot can be identified from the presence of characters and their perspective added to it. Starting with Omol, the meaning of Omol in Bengali is something pure and untouched by the filth. As Tagore writes in a letter to G.F. Andrews regarding the post office, I quote, Omol represents the man whose soul has received the call of the open road. He seeks freedom from the comfortable enclosure of habits sanctioned by prudent and from the walls of rigid opinion built for him by the respectable. Unquote. Omol can be seen as a symbol who connects to an imaginary plane, who leaves the mundane and parochial world at the end of the play to something which seems death to the worldly characters of the play. But where the king, of whom Omol wanted to be the postman, will let him identify the polar star, a star which remains as a symbol of absolute truth over the relative truth and that decays with the time. This can only be shown by the king who does not ponder over the parochial ties. Tagore introduces the symbol of king in many of his dramatic works, and each king has their own potential to attach to the play. In the post office, this king is absent in the stage. Only Omol's imagination brings his identity to the reality, and the symbol of Omol's character becomes prominent, as if he is the soul which does not end with the earthly death, but attaches to the being things of nature, of a world unbounded. Another reading before concluding the idea of the post office is to attach Tagore's idea of man and his own imagined community through the education. The colonial past and its effect in the feudal mind, sets of his nation have been allegorically dealt in many of his works. Now, the next play, Chitra. Let us talk about Chitra's plot, deviation from myth, and other aspects too. Tagore's poetic play Chitrangada, which was published in 1892 after the translation into English as Chitra for the English stage with elaborate stage instruction, got published as Chitra 1914 without the stage directions, finally reworking it into a dance drama in 1935. A poet dramatist like Tagore, working on a piece of work for long 40 years in different forms, certainly needs attention as a work of Indian literature as the literary and collective angles evolved over this period. Based on the Mahabharata legend of Chitrangada and Arjun, the play is interspersed into 9 balanced scenes, where godly characters of Madana, the god of love, and Vasanta, the god of season, are present in 4 scenes, and alternatingly in all other scenes the 2 characters, Chitra and Arjun, are depicted as the storyline builds up and finally with a climax. The scenes are arranged in a fashion where Arjuna comes to Manipur and meets Chitra, daughter of Chitravahana, the king, a princess who is brought up by her father in a way so that she can perform the works with masculine identifier, is defined as Kurupa or the ugly. When she desires Arjuna and gets refused with the boons of Madana and Vasanta, she gets a feminine outlook. Then Arjuna desires her and she agrees to accept Arjuna. However, a symbol of time attached with the boon recurs in the thought of Chitra, and she reveals her true self to Arjuna. Finally, Arjuna accepts. The play ends with the hopeful spirit of Chitra that a successor of Arjuna is in her womb. The plot or the storyboard remains almost the same over the phases of change. However, the readings of the text can be multi-layered before going to unveil the possible symbols studied in this drama. It is thus necessary to study the deviation of Tagore's Chitrangada from the epic described one. The Mahabharata version deals with Chitravahana and Arjuna in the center of the plot, denying completely the identity or agency attached to Chitra. But Tagore keeps Arjuna as a signifier of the masculinity and victory, and engages with Chitra's evolution over time. Therefore, even though the cult value is lost, it enables Tagore to describe the myth in the modern narrative. As Satpathy describes, I quote, Tagore, after giving deft touches of signifiers for masculinity at crucial junctures, turns to the traditional Hindu views of Maya, a reality, as illusion. Alas, that this failed disguise, the body should make one blind to the deathless spirit. I unquote. Arjuna realizes this much later, almost at the end of the 1 year of feminine beauty granted to Chitra. Illusion is the first appearance of truth. The shift from the text of Mahabharata is important, as the figure of Arjuna remains in the mind of a reader as a symbol of success, but that successful man is somewhere lost in the woe of celibacy and will be traced back to life by a woman, Chitrangada. Therefore, the idea of feminine gestures and beauty gets dissolved at the end of the play, when illusion becomes the first step towards a reality that Tagore repeats in many of his works as the human reality. At this point, the Tagore made changes in Chitra becomes much relevant, as the ultra-feminine beauty was at first needed to win the masculine figure. The gift of beauty is given by the gods Madana and Vasanta for a span of a year. What is most remarkable is that there is no obvious exhibition of this symbol, which grows so naturally and spontaneously out of the story that it is not noticeous as a symbol in the beginning at all. Chitra, who is brought up as a son, falls in love with Arjuna, who sends her away, saying, "I have the vow of celibacy. I am not fit for thy husband." So she seeks the helps of the god Madana and Vasanta, to whom she says, "Had I the time needed, I could win his heart by slow degree and ask no help of the gods. But it is the labor of lifetime to make one's truth self fully known and honored." Her prayer is granted, but with a significant difference. Vasanta says, "Not for a span of a day, but for 1 whole year, the charm of spring blossoms shall nestle around thy limbs." The significance of time is first indicated in Chitra's words. "Had I but the time needed, it is the labor of lifetime to make one's true self known and honored." This is how Tagore reflected his idea on gender in this play. Now let us talk about the next play, The Waterfall, the plot, politics and other aspects of the play. The Waterfall, published in 1922 with its Bengali original Muktadhara. The insatiable craving of capitalist industrialization and imperialism had been temporarily diminished by the First World War. The war had deeply distressed the poet, and the contradiction of what he called the machine civilization was stark Muktadhara. Thus, even being a Tagore play with its symbolic elements and allegories in it, is much more concrete in its setup, with a proper background of the incidents, and the incidents placed in a proper geometry of incidents. Muktadhara somehow releases Tagore from his poetic dialogue to a more prose world, a world of incidents and actions. Muktadhara, meaning free stream in Bengali, is a waterfall in fictional Uttarkut, ruled by an autocratic king, Ranajit. The waterfall flows from Uttarkot to adjoining valley, Shivtarai. The people of Shivtarai lead their lives with the river. The tyrant king wants to bring Shivtarai under his control and decides to vanquish the people by damming the waterfall, thus denying them water. So the king employs the royal engineer Vibhuti go as to build a great dam to prevent the water reaching the plains below. When the people of Shivtarai are informed about getting jobs, they welcome the idea of building the dam and celebrate in honor of the machine along with Vibhuti. They realize their mistakes when the water is stopped from the mountain. The prince Abhijit learns that he was discovered by the side of the waterfall and adopted by the king. His love for the waterfall and sympathy for the people lead him to stop the king. He demolishes the machine and makes the waterfall free. In the process, the prince is swept away with his mother Muktadhara. By giving freedom to the waterfall, Abhijit releases the people of Shivtarai also to a new dawn. The play has significant names of the places of the characters attached with the Hindu mythology of India. Shiva, being the god of both creation and destruction, becomes important figure in this play. Firstly, with the temple of Vairab, who destroys all evils. The devotees describe as a lord of terror, as a wreaker of wrath and a conqueror of evil. Vairab represents within his body the eternal peace of Shiva, his spirit of renunciation, and simultaneously remind us of the destructive powers. Then the place Shivtarai becomes important. As ruled by the rulers of Uttarkot, Tarai is a place which means it is situated in the foothills of a mountain. Therefore, it suddenly reminds of the geographic location of India and then remains the name of the character. Ron in Bengali refers to war. An autocratic king who owns wars is termed as Ranojit, and Vibhuti means a state of mind or salvation which is arrived through celibacy. Therefore, the autocratic king and the inhuman scientist attached with the making of the dam reveals the underlying imperial grab in India, where there is a resolution comes from a person named Abhijit relating to the Vedantic idea of fearless and thus dissociated from the heritable background of Ranojit. Thus Muktadhara layered in the mythological attributes with the purpose of exposing the reality, engages with symbols in different planes. Now, let us talk about Tagore's one of the most celebrated drama, that is Red Oleander's plot, the idea of freedom and other aspects of the play. Red Oleanders was written in 1923 to 24, originally written as Rakta Karabi in Bengali by Tagore. The stream of consciousness that started in Tagore's plays during Muktadhara continues in Red Oleander at a more complex yet well-organized level. The usual discussion of symbols and literary attributes can be only attached once this phase of writing which the poet was going through is much clearer. Tagore himself comments on Rakta Karabi. I quote, "It is a vision that has come to me in the darkest hour of dismay." Unquote. The darkest hour of dismay enables Tagore to entail a story of town, a dystopic town in the background, again with the same engineering of characters and incidents placed in a well-thought geometry of a town. Though Tagore at first warns the reader in the introductory note of Red Oleanders, he said, "It is not at all from mythical times, nor can it be called metaphorical." Then when the reader thinks of a real incident may have induced the dramatist, Tagore assumes that the version of truth is the poet's version of truth. there lies the masterstroke of red oleanders in a dystopic town named Yakshapuri, where the people are engaged in digging out gold, scratching out from the earth as ordered by the king, the antagonist of the play. The people are made to forgotten the real joy and the sweetness of nature and are called by numbers. At one hand, the religious master, and at the other, the wine seller keeps them alive to extract the gold, which signifies the age-old death of lives. At this outset, a one-act play, even though the proper format of one act is less followed, revolves around. The plot or the synopsis should be treated with the name simultaneously. Red oleanders, a flower of which the garland is made and the protagonist lady Nandini wears. Nandini does not resemble to one aspect as the entire play evolves and the characters are depicted through the eyes and words of Nandini. Therefore, if Yakshapuri is the coke town, then Nandini is the conscience. Along with Nandini, the imaginary character of Ranjan plays a present in the play. Nandini, as posed with her simple poetic words with everyone in the town, reminds of the flashed up of unintended in the Yaksha town. The king and his iron-made chamber with the networks of various workmen of various classes and the working men being reduced to numbers does not gestures of a complete human, which Nandini brings to Yakshapuri. This play has several layers of characters. Some are known by names when they talk to Nandini, and when they returns to the world of excavation, their number retains. Kishore, Fagulal or a Gokul is thus fearful and yet unknowingly happy while meeting Nandini. The class of mayor or of professor and of the other upper strata always faces Nandini with a feeling of conspiring against the system. The only person who cannot be fitted into this frame is Bishu, the poet-singer of the play, who realizes the consequences of the network of the town and the excavation, but identifies himself with the other part of the Ranjan or moon, the part which is not it up, the part which is even being aware of the constant plunder of humanity, could not resist it. Thus, Bishu is the conscience who was silent till Nandini arrives with the advent of Ranjan. The symbol of a rebel against the inhuman extraction of wealth in the post-World War I scenario can be much vividly discovered if the idea of a rebel for humanity is read in the Red Oleanders. Tagore's need of Nandini was to reject the defined masculinity in the capitalist world of war and exploitation. A fertile land in the end of the play with the fruits of earth could only be seen, as the fertility of Mother Nature can be obtained if it is not filled with the greed but with the masculinity of creation. Now, let us conclude our discussion. These plays discussed, if seen in the retrospect, it enables us to extract the poetic excellence, but moreover, the evolution of thesis of Tagore as a humanist and as a philosopher. From the individual self-freedom through the openness of mind and liberating the soul in a converging and assimilating world of post office to the profound feminine self and the reality of being of a person in Chitra. From the world of Abhijit to the world of Nandini, from the nature to the assimilation of nature, the concrete vision of an imaginary nation is found. A poet's nation at the verge of extinction with the grab of modernity and greed, with unscrupulous masculinity overdoing the creative Shiva, the masculinity of Indian nature, and finally a fear of a dystopic world where the colonial powers define the nation within colonies and fragments humanity. As said by the poet himself in Sadhana, a literary magazine, I quote the poet here, "A man who by his profession is concerned with any particular aspect of life is apt to magnify his proportions in laying undue stress upon facts. He loses his hold upon truth. A detective may have the opportunity of studying crimes in detail, but he loses his sense of their relative place in the whole social economy." I unquote. Now, let us summarize our whole discussion. In this module on theory and play of Tagore, we have chosen 4 plays written by Tagore, and those are Post Office or Daghor, Chitrangada, Waterfall or Muktadhara, and Red Oleanders or Rakta Karabi. We have introduced Tagore very briefly in this discussion, and we have discussed all the 4 plays with plot, themes and characters, and with textual analysis of the plays and the greater significance of the plays and the context of the plays also. We have tried to discuss the theory which has reflected in these 4 plays, and the theory and the philosophy of Tagore, what was reflected in different other writings of the Tagore, also reflected in these plays, and we have pointed out those. We came to know from these plays that how much Tagore criticized the idea, the so-called idea of nation, how much Tagore criticized the imperialism and the bad effect of industrialization of the people of the area, what is known today as third world or global south or etc. Tagore was very much critical about the human freedom. Tagore was very much critical about the whole education system, and Tagore believed that there should be freedom in every sense of human practice and expression, and Tagore very specifically believed in freedom in education. And from those ideas, the character like Amol came in the play called Post Office or Daghor. Tagore always tried to build a character of goodness, a well character who will overcome all the power of the evils and who will call a new dawn, a new morning for the common people, for the humanity in much better sense. So through the plays Muktadhara and Rakta Karabi, we found that Tagore was so eager to call a person, to call a conscience or consciousness, what will bring us to the better world, to the new world, which will establish the victory of humanity. And Tagore made us very much conscious about the imperial power and the power of evil power of industrialization and the capitalism. In the play Chitrangada or in Chitra, Tagore was very much critical about gender hierarchy. Tagore was very much critical about the gender biasness, and Tagore tried to transcend all the minority feeling from the gender perspective in this play, and he suggested a new reading of our society, what tries to make differences, what tries to marginalize a certain kind of gender identity. So through all these plays, we came to know about all these critical issues, theory and philosophy of mind and victory of humanity, what Tagore wanted, what Tagore practiced, and what Tagore imagined for. Thank you.